And we are going to begin our trek toward the election day with something we're going to be featuring each Friday that we did during 2008. And that is a conversation with Alan Kelly, CEO, founder of the Playmaker system, adjunct professor at George Washington University, and author of The Elements of Influence. Alan Kelly, welcome back.
Good morning. Thanks.
Good
to be back.
People who remember that you were here each week during the campaign in 2008, but for those who don't know, let's reintroduce you and talk a little bit about the Playmaker systems, exactly what it is that you have made your work around here.
Playmaker Systems is the name of my firm. Mm-hmm. The Playmaker system, if you will, is what you might think of as the first periodic table of politics. Mm-hmm.
For those who remember their chemistry from high school, the carbon with the valence of 6 or whatever the heck it was.
Very good. And if you're really good, you could name and sing the elements like Tom Lehrer.
No,
there's antimony, arsenic, aluminum, selenium. And
I don't want to do that.
And I could do that. At any rate, but it struck me, I'm a child professionally born and bred of Silicon Valley, and it struck me when I work with some of my clients out mm-hmm. there, the likes of Larry Ellison and people at HP, that something was going on as they made their bids in sales and marketing and advertising and public relations, that there was something going on that we hadn't really captured. And one day, my client Larry Ellison said something like, he said, the PC is a ridiculous device. He said this before Bill Gates was about to get on and give a keynote. This is an incendiary thing to say, not unlike some of the things you heard in last night's debate at South Carolina. But I felt at that moment that I'd kind of captured a neutrino, if you will, like the golden snitch, something made sense to me. And I thought, that's a thing. That feels like something. Now, what is it? And if there's one thing, could there be another? If there's two, could there be three? And if there are three, could we categorize them? And this led over a series of months and years to this table of what we believe are irreducibly unique, sounds Darwinian, I suppose, of stratagems that are common to anybody and everybody in the fields of influence, which of course includes politics, but also is joined by marketing, sales, advertising, lobbying, even information warfare.
Mm-hmm. And this is the standard table of influence strategies, and you also have a blog about this. I want to go specifically to what you're writing about in this most recent edition, which is the First Amendment to the 11th Commandment. The 11th Commandment is one that people give credit to for Ronald Reagan, as you correctly point out. It actually comes from Gaylord Parkinson, who was a California State Republican Party chairman, who had said, "Thou shalt not speak ill of any Republican." Ronald Reagan sort of borrowed this, used it, and it was forever after attributed to him. The importance of it in this campaign. Explain what your take is on this.
Well, what happens if you take the 11th Commandment seriously, as some have over the past almost 50 years, what we now know, having defined this system and knowing the system having 25 discrete units in it, we can look at this and we can know that, that means then that a politician or a campaigner cannot use particular stratagems, or what we call plays, mm-hmm. just to make it simple and portable. That means even more specifically, they can't employ strategies called baits, which may be self-evident. They can't run call-outs. They can't run even clever mirrors. They have to be very careful about labels. Label is an example, like Carrie is a flip-flopper. That's a label. Mm-hmm. And so immediately you've got 5 stratagems of the total of 25 that you can't use. Mm-hmm. So in the spectrum of influence strategy, you just cut out 20% of your available options to make your point, to drive your agenda, to position, reposition, or even deposition competitors. That's significant. Mm-hmm. That's a significant shackling.
The weakening of your opponent, shackling, as you say.
Oh, yeah. Now, of course, last night was a case example of how the 11th Commandment is really being thrown out. So maybe the title is wrong. It's not the First Amendment.
Well, they can all go to confession tomorrow for the priest, if they break the 11th Commandment. But to your point, aside from anything else, the call-outs, for one,
right.
There were a few of those, I would guess.
That's right. And they're also, but let's not forget, the media is a very, very active player here. And John King, I think, was front and center. To me, him and maybe Santorum's performance are really the big stories from last night, in my opinion. Because the plays that Santorum is running are call-outs, and the plays that John King is running is a bait. Now,
The bait being throwing out the interview and
he's
saying
teasing,
or was it the bait when he asked Newt Gingrich or Rick Santorum about comments that Newt Gingrich had made about Rick Santorum that he should drop out? Which of those, or are those both baits?
Well, I'm talking about his opener with Gingrich. Mm-hmm. The bait, we define this very carefully, is the overt provocation of another player through action or information. Now, normally, the Fourth Estate, in its real role, should not really be running or employing baits. But they do, because they have a different. Oh yeah, they have a different motive, and so it was just.
And I sat here last night with Ed O'Keefe, and to your point, Alan Kelly, I sat here and I said, that probably is not an appropriate opener for a presidential debate.
No.
And he said, but what they did was they grabbed the headline the next day, which is to say, that way John King is leading, the CNN debate is leading a lot of newscasts this morning, and that's the overarching goal. It's not to necessarily elect a president or find the best candidate. It's to get the ratings to go up for CNN.
It is about entertainment, first and always now. And so that means that more soft-sided stratagems aren't going to be nearly as effective. So we don't have Tim Russert type of presentations or characterizations where he very technically lays out the research to infer a question. Instead, we get the John King saying, "So, did you have an open marriage or not?"
Mm-hmm.
So.
Do you want to respond to that debate?
That's
it was put in a very nice, open way. Do you care to? No.
That's right.
But I will. And then he went on to slam. Once again, Alan Kelly with his Plays for the Presidency blog, which you'll be able to find online. This 11th Commandment, though, aside from anything else, Rick Perry was sort of in this for a while when it came to, I guess, vulture capitalist. Is that one of those labels you were talking about?
Vulture capitalism.
Yes.
Yes.
That's a label?
Yeah, it absolutely is.
What's a ping?
Well, a ping is a what we call it's a testing play, where you're trying to model or imply or infer a particular point. It is nothing really more complex than your mother walking into your bedroom as a boy when your bed is unmade and lifting an eyebrow, and you should have made that bed. It is a vague suggestion, usually done through symbology, not necessarily messaging.
Mm-hmm.
So, it is the kind of play which can be, if Newt Gingrich talks about welfare mothers,
mm-hmm.
It can have, and it is said to be having racial overtones. He is trying to speak to a base so he can hit those hot buttons without having to say something a bit more overt. So it's a strategy that makes a point and drives an agenda through more subtle reference.
How would that figure into the 11th Commandment, though? Because you say that is preempted, if you will, by invoking the 11th Commandment of not speaking ill of a fellow Republican. So give us an example of how that works into this.
Well, the ping is the ping allows a candidate to make a hostile or to reposition or deposition a candidate without really having to say it. Let's see. Last night in their opening statements, Rick Santorum was very quick to talk about that his marriage and his family values immediately before Newt Gingrich. The juxtaposition in itself was a ping.
Mm-hmm.
He knew exactly the context and what to say, so to compare directly with Newt Gingrich and raise the heat on that day's revelation that he had called for an open marriage, ostensibly.
Mm-hmm. All right.
So in terms of how this is arranged on the table, the ping is very much on the opposite side of the spectrum, because it's a very, very low engagement strategy, whereas the call out is entirely overt. It's completely transparent. You may not like it, but you know exactly what it is. A ping, you can't really tell necessarily.
Mm-hmm. On this whole idea of what they're doing when it comes to call-outs, pings, jams is another one, and labels, as we've discussed.
Yeah.
This whole thing about where Mitt Romney seems to be uncomfortable, and now he is sort of finding his legs, if you will, in this argument about his tax returns.
No, he's not finding his legs. I don't think so.
Well, this morning he sounded a little bit more. This is on a Fox and Friends interview this morning.
It's taking some time.
Absolutely. and this is the point. He was in a debate on Monday, and fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me, because he still couldn't answer it last night, at least to the extent that he would have satisfied even the very sympathetic audience last night. They booed him at one point when he just said, well, I don't want to. That April time period, that kind of dissembling has been a problem for him. But has this at all been something where the others have just sat back and watched this happen? I mean, Newt Gingrich has said, well, this is up for him to say, and that almost sounds like a ping in that, the disapproving eyebrow is raised because he says, I've released mine.
Yeah.
It's up to him. He can do whatever he wants.
Yeah. I don't think they've been very restrained. Winston Churchill got the prime minister's ship by essentially sitting in a meeting with the king and Neville Chamberlain and saying nothing. And the play that he employed was what we call simply a pause, which is very uncharacteristic for Winston Churchill. And I haven't seen too much of that, but it might make sense in the case of Romney to do nothing, because it is evident that he is very uncomfortable with this issue, and it is easy to conclude that there is something going on that is going to be revelational.
One last quick question before we wrap up this week's version. Last night, when the question of the Newt Gingrich infidelity came up, Mitt Romney made a quick comment, which was, let's move on to the important issues.
Yes.
And it was his way of not engaging Newt Gingrich. How would you characterize that? Would you characterize that as a play in any way?
Well, he passed.
Okay.
And that he which is somewhat of an independently oriented play, but he passed on that subject. He did it for entirely strategic reasons. It made him look above board. It helped to sort of relieve, I think, a lot of pressure that people were feeling. It helped him to make people feel more comfortable, because I think it was from the beginning, it was a very, very uncomfortable moment.
Well, there were a lot of other moments and there will be many more to come. For people who want to read up on this, and we're going to be talking about this every single week, and not just about the Republicans, there's going to be the presidential plays too, because there are just a few of those going on as we watch this. David Axelrod and the group in Chicago is already planning different things. He's opening up a school of politics in that city. You know that, don't you? Mm-hmm. Yeah, starting up soon.
This is why we teach it at GW. We think that influence strategy is something that it's appropriate to be sitting here in a radio studio, because influence strategy is like radio waves. In electromagnetic spectrum, they are everywhere. We are saturated by motive, by moves and countermoves, and so we're really past due, particularly in politics, to understand most precisely what exactly they are. And tables like this or others, I think, will help us to understand that.
It's bringing a bit of science to the art of politics.
I guess.
Yeah, a lot of science. But it's interesting, it's fascinating, and we're going to do more. Give us a website for people who want to catch up, Alan.
www.plays2run, Plays, the number 2, RUN.com. And if you want to email me, give us a shout at POTUS@plays2run.com.
Okay, plays 2 with the numeral 2 in there. That's great. We'll talk to you next week, too.
See you next week.
Thanks so much, and we'll watch the blogs. Alan Kelly joining us here as we continue our conversation. He is the CEO and founder of the Playmaker Systems and author of The Elements of Influence.